call to start the Nelson Police Board regular meeting of April the 3rd. And we would like to acknowledge that the land on which we live is traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, the Syilx, and the Sitixt people, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. Item number 2 is our consent agenda. We have 2A, B, C, D, and E. Is there anything that anybody wants to pull out of there for discussion? Okay. Nobody want to take anything out? Could I have a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented? Thank you, Lena. Thank you. All in favor? And that carries. Public participation. We have nobody here from the public. Wow, getting worried. We haven't had public participation for a while. Okay, well. Okay, item 4, business arising from previous meetings. We have none. And item 5, director's reports. So 5A is the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. Somebody have?
I don't have anything that's on the minutes.
The minutes, I think.
Covered all?
The minutes were shared, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And does anybody have any concerns or questions about the minutes that circulated? Okay. Great. So if I can have a motion to receive the minutes, please. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Okay. 5B is the police board manual. I know that
I dropped the ball a bit, but my life got kind of bananas with some things at work. So I'll work on it more in Vancouver. There we go. I promise. Life just got really nuts.
Oh, no, and that's fine. I just sort of thought, I was just thinking to myself when I've often said, oh, well, yeah, well, I'm going to that meeting and, you know, the evenings, I'll just be able to work on it in my hotel room in the evening and like.
I'll have it ready for the next meeting because after the 20th, I've got lots of time. So.
Well, and I was going to work on it with you,
Yeah.
but I ended up spending all my time on the strategic plan. So
All right.
we'll get together.
Sounds good.
Okay, can I just say something about that, the update of the manual? Like one of the things that we have that we're really good about is having all our committees and we have terms of references and also on paper it looks really good. But that update of the manual is really the responsibility of the governance committee. We haven't met, we don't have a chair. So maybe at some opportunity we can talk about that and so that it doesn't just fall on the goodness of your heart or, you know, like it was great that Sue jumped in and said, I've already done the first half, you know, and then you jumped in. You said, I'll do the second half, but actually you're a member of the committee, so am I.
Totally.
We're the only 2 people and because we don't have enough members, we haven't looked at that, but I think we can't keep saying that. We just have to have the committees take that, you know, the responsibility on, whether it's 2 members or 4 members, you know, doesn't. Yeah, and just do that because then it wouldn't be this ad hoc thing where then you're feeling bad, right? And really it should be the responsibility of the committee. Yeah, and the only committee that like really has to do that work is the finance committee, right?
And that's only once a year.
And yeah, but that's okay. Like we only are supposed to meet twice a year. Like it's not it's not onerous really.
Yeah, I've got here that meeting once a year. I can't imagine governance meeting once a year, but it says only once a year as well.
Or as needed. Like then it's a call of the chair and then we would work with Shiloh, but we don't have a chair.
I don't have a chair.
So nobody's, right? Nobody's paying attention. So I think it would make all our lives easier if we decide on the, you know, who's on the committee and just appoint a chair. And then it is between the chair and Shiloh to come up with making sure we meet.
Right.
That's the next item on our agenda, by the way.
Oh, okay. I'll speak to it. I know, like I had said to Shiloh, I have to speak to it. And I thought, thank you, we're talking about the manual. Yeah, anyway, so I've said my piece.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, so
That's a very sad orange.
we will get on with that review of that and see where it lands. But I think it's good for probably all of us to make sure that we've read the manual. And I'm sure that the committee, regardless, would, if somebody saw something that really didn't sit well with them, to make sure that the governance committee saw something they thought was really like,
It's just real thick. It's a lot of copy and paste from the police act. Like, it's really dense.
I read the whole manual before I started.
Yeah.
I did.
So did I, but it made no
Not-
sense
not
to
the
me.
police act. I didn't read the police. But I did read the manual, and I remember at one time we had a public meeting, and it became a joke because we were not following what I had read in the manual. And I said, hey, like, we're not supposed to, we're just supposed to ask for clarification. We're not supposed to have a discussion when the people are in the room and
Yeah.
whatever. So I had, and it was a big joke, only, and I told them the page and the sound. I was one of those, like, good students.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's
point.
all forgotten now. It was 4 years ago.
I read the police act before I started this job, and it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me at that time either.
Yeah.
It's Sort of
and
that,
any better since?
Yeah, because it had to.
Yeah.
and after you trial and error through it quite a few times, it
Right.
starts to kind of, well, that's what they mean by this.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, this is what it says, but this is actually what it means.
What it means, yeah,
It's not really clear in a
I
lot of
know.
places.
Yeah, totally.
I'm glad it didn't keep you from signing the offer letter.
Okay, so 5C, so we've got is about the police board committees and the schedule of meetings. And so I'm just trying to figure out, so we last meeting, we talked about who was gonna be on all of these committees. And so perhaps the discussion be like, should the people that are on the committees try to meet with you then, Shiloh, and try to pick a few dates that works with everybody's schedule?
I think so. Yeah, okay.
And I'm just thinking about your workload, Shiloh, is I'm just trying to figure out whether or not the committees feel that they need to have somebody there taking notes, or if committees, I mean, if you're really only meeting once a year for some of these,
Don't
I
you
just-
think we could produce our own notes?
yeah, that's what people feel comfortable with that. I guess if some topic came up that was really heady, you might want to ask Shiloh if she could.
Well, I think it's important that we actually have something in writing after the meetings,
Yeah, totally.
because we haven't really been careful about that in the past.
Yeah, I think it's in the terms of reference, about the minutes and, but I think you're wondering about Shiloh's time, right? Like,
Yeah, like, so
So she
that,
doesn't need to be at the meeting, but she's the consistent person in terms of the fact that we have to be, like, because we keep changing, right? Like, so there'll be new members coming on. They won't know that the governance committee hasn't met or stuff like that. So for those things,
Yeah.
Shiloh.
well, she needs to keep the
Yeah.
schedule to make sure that
Yeah.
you've met and whatever, and like
That's
help you
right.
coordinate that, but I was just sort of thinking like, hopefully that for some of these meetings that you're not gonna have to have
No.
Shiloh there taking,
Yeah, totally. Well,
No.
it's probably not a bad idea to like, I know we've talked about a forward calendar in the past, and we kind of went over that in that training. That, these things maybe like should go on the forward calendar for like, this meeting should happen in
Yeah,
November. The finance committee needs to meet in November every year, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, we
like
do
right on
have,
the-
we do have that
we do have it.
action item list is chronological. That's the general idea.
Oh, okay. It's this one you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
but I think what Devin's referring to is like in the training, it said it's a calendar, so it says in January. But so we know for the year when
Mhm.
the
Yeah,
different
and then
things
the
happen.
actual
Yeah,
dates can be
yeah, rather than an action list of things that are coming up.
sorted. Yeah.
I have a
Yeah.
template for that too, Shiloh.
I have it
She
actually.
has it,
Okay.
yeah.
The, so I think what we'll do is just at this point, committee members can try to coordinate with Shiloh of figuring out when is the appropriate time.
Yeah, I think each committee has to meet and just come up with what they want to do in the year.
Yeah,
Totally.
so once you guys start having dates, then we'll put them into the
Then we'll-
calendar.
yeah.
In case other people want to attend, I wouldn't imagine that a committee meeting is restricted to just the members appointed.
Is there a reason why the recruitment and selection committee is not listed on here? Is that because it's only if there's a position to be recruited for?
Yeah, I was specific to the chief and the deputy chief positions. If those positions come up, then the committee will meet.
I beg your pardon?
When the positions come up, that's when we meet. Like for the deputy and the chief. The recruitment, HR is like, HR is an ongoing committee.
And what's the difference between HR and the recruitment and selection? Because my understanding was that the HR committee is the performance of the chief.
HR is an ongoing committee, so I don't have the terms of reference in my head, but I don't know but if I remember correctly, the recruitment one was it's like an ad hoc committee that's established, and I happen to be on it for the chief and the deputy chief. But it doesn't mean I'm going to be on it next time.
And it wouldn't be for the deputy chief, that's the chief's prerogative, right?
But I was involved in the
So
the interview.
Liz and
yeah,
Nina and.
two of us,
And HR, Joanna was at the time.
yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm just opening this up and saying, it says here, the Nelson Police Board Human Resource Committee purpose, the primary purpose is to assist the board in its key responsibility of hiring, monitoring, and assessing the performance of the chief constable and filling its oversight
Performance after they
responsibility.
are elected.
Yeah.
Read that again, please.
It's just
Janice.
hiring in there.
The primary function of the Nelson Police Board Human Resource Committee is to assist the board in its key responsibilities of hiring, monitoring, and assessing the performance of the chief constable and fulfilling its oversight responsibilities under the Police Act. The chief constable is the board's only employee, and all other HR activities or issues with respect to the Nelson Police Department's sworn and civilian staff are the responsibilities of the chief constable.
Right.
So perhaps Liz was on the HR committee, so she was already on that committee, and then I volunteered
So
on.
then I thought recruitment and selection was potentially having a board participate in staff selection.
No.
It's not like because it has
I was part of the committee.
the NCO and the NPA representative and Shiloh, which to me doesn't sound like hiring the chief.
Is there terms of reference for that recruitment and selection committee?
I always thought it was chief.
I know what we did.
Yeah.
Things may have changed, but I was on that committee.
Well, I'm thinking we should have one or the other, but it looks like both is overkill.
Yeah, there is an overlap, but what I understood was this HR committee, and then maybe that's why, like, I was on it, because Liz was the HR committee member, Joanna was there, and, I thought maybe they wanted one more person, and at a meeting, I volunteered or was appointed. I don't remember the process, but I was definitely part of that committee, selection and recruitment. And I was on that committee when the deputy was hired too.
Well, without clear direction for the two committees, it just seems,
Maybe they need to meet and
Confusing.
come up with clarification.
Yeah, I would have to see what the committee terms of reference are
Yeah.
for recruitment and selection. Yeah, because it does clearly say hiring in this HR one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seemed to me they are kind of very overlapping.
Overlapping, yeah.
and there's no point in having, a list with people's names on it if there isn't any
It's only an
clear
ad hoc.
directive.
Yeah, I think that the recruitment committee may have been old because I can't find the terms of reference for it. So, and the human resources committee looks like it just became, terms of reference came out 2021.
Okay.
So maybe it replaced then that.
It replaced yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, one less committee that we have to try to find appointees for.
Or set meetings for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite clear here, like it even goes on duties responsibility, 3.1, participate in the hiring committee for the chief constable. So it's not to say that, I think that there's probably some flexibility when it comes to actually hiring. It's probably the discretion of the board, whether or not you want to have, potentially also somebody,
And other people.
yeah, somebody external, somebody, in the past, we've like hired a CAO, it's often been like a city councillor, it's been somebody external from the business community, somebody, that's been a long-term resident, like, yeah, so.
Yeah, I don't think we had terms of references for all the committees either. So it's evolving. So I think that's how it happened when HR committee replaced the.
And this is a busy committee meeting with the chief 4 times a year.
The HR committee meets 4 times a year.
It says the HR committee will meet quarterly to ensure an annual performance review of the chief constable, including periodic meetings as well.
Are we doing that?
No.
I keep going and there's nobody else there.
That's what I say.
Right, nice.
It's really good on paper, but
A review of the committee candidates or whatever.
Little gold star on the paper and then
Yeah,
move on to the next
I
meeting.
Yeah.
I think when human resources meets, whoever's on that committee, is to look at that timeline, because I think
Yeah.
quarterly is
Too much.
very heavy.
Yeah, probably twice a year is
I
fine.
think twice a year is adequate. And the whole idea, because the fact that you can have periodic meetings, is that if things aren't working well, obviously you'd be
Meeting more frequently, yeah.
stepping up the meeting. So
Mhm.
I think that's something to look at reviewing, because it just seems sort of funny where I think this is a board, and if any meeting was gonna meet 4 times a year, I'd say it would be governance. Governance is only once, but we're doing HR 4 times a year. Just my own thoughts on that. So, okay.
So maybe they can look at the terms of reference.
Everybody knows who's on the committee. Talk to each others, and then figure out when you would like to meet. Let Charlo know. It can be put on a calendar so all of us can see.
Whoa,
Oh, I think I just broke.
that was crazy.
Is that your phone?
No, that was the chair.
That was the chair.
Oh, okay, but not with the
No,
phone
no,
against the side of it. Okay.
no.
Best you get a new chair.
Well, that was exciting.
We were just talking about getting new chairs.
Oh, good, this one's one on the video too, right?
Yeah.
Clearly marked that one.
Oh, weird, it's empty in there.
I do have one.
Thank you. Well, that was exciting. Sorry,
That's
everybody.
excitement.
Not the kind of excitement.
No, gosh.
All right. Well, at least I'm still up and not on the floor.
I'm glad it wasn't the phone.
Yeah, yeah.
Had it.
Me too. Me too.
Okay.
Okay, so that's 5C. We don't need to have any motions there. Chair's report, I don't have anything particular to report unless anybody's got any questions for me. And new business, so we have 7A, special events, security, planning repayment. And there's a report there. Does anybody have any questions or, Chief, did you write this or?
Are we talking about this
Or-
repayment? Are we onto the repayment thing already?
Mhm.
Oh, I have some things to say about this. Anybody else?
Go for it.
So when I'm looking at this, you're talking about things like the Queen City Cruise and the Pride Parade and that sort of thing, right?
Right.
So a couple of things. One, if we want to have a more kind, pleasant, compassionate, whatever we want to call it, relationship with our community, charging nonprofits for police services for events, I'm not really into. Because I think that, like, if we know these are things that happen every year, they should be budgeted for accordingly. That, we just asked the community for a 3% or 4% tax increase, and then to go after nonprofits, which is more tax dollars for repayment of something like this. Like, I really don't think that we should be charging community groups to hold events. Like, they already have a $400 insurance bill they have to come up with. And that we should be, if we know these are things that are happening every year, that we should be budgeting accordingly for them and not putting our hands in people's pockets, into nonprofit pockets that are what make Nelson the vibrant community that we live in. And if, we are interested in having a better relationship with the community, I don't feel that charging people for police services for events is the way to go about it.
And I support you 100%. That was my total. When I read that, I was okay with the city, like, that it be part of the city budget because it's extra policing. I can see the rationale for that you have your policing and you have a budget for all that. And then these extra things, extra burden, more hours, it's going to cost the police department. And I felt okay about the city budget having to cover that part. But I thought, oh my gosh, these are they don't have any budgets, these.
It's all done by volunteers anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's, Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there is some of that's built into that as part of the proposal that, for events like that it could be as part of the regular budget, but it needs to be identified as an additional cost to the department over and above everyday policing.
Yeah.
But I also think there's talking about, there is other events that aren't nonprofits that have festivals and beer gardens and those types of things that potentially higher risk. And
If the Caslo Jazz Fest, for example, were happening in Nelson, that would be something that is intended to make a profit. It's not.
Yeah, and they sell tickets for it and it's confined and lots of times they have liquor licenses and stuff. I think it's more, the thought is more towards those type of events.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
like
but the
commercial
message doesn't come across that way.
No.
So it's like, when I read it, like I was thinking of the Pride Parade and, the organizations like that, where they don't have funding. But if we want to encourage people who are applying for grants to remember that it costs for security and put a, line item that's quite different than if they get the funding from wherever, that's covered. So we have to, and I felt that contradiction, like we are saying we're going to be carrying and we're, and then we pass a policy like that. It just seems like a
I
contradiction.
know you think of a million things like the Santa Claus arriving on Baker Street or the grad parade
Yeah.
and things like that. Yes, it requires a police presence to a certain extent, but they're really hard pressed to ask them for money.
Yeah.
If I can. Yeah, so a lot of other municipalities are doing this. And so how it kind of works to sort of deal with your concern there is that the cities would have essentially two different buckets of money. So, and the city makes these decisions, it's not a police thing. So the city decides, which bucket they're going to pull from in order to support the policing aspects of that particular event. So if it's the nonprofit, city can decide what's going to be this special pool of money that we have here to support that nonprofit. Or if it's, the beer gardens and, the for-profit type of events that can be quite large, the city can go to those event organizers and say, yeah, we're approving this, but this is what it's going to cost. And so the city then gets a bit more money back that way. Either way, we, the police department, work with the city organizers who work with the event organizers. And that it really is that cooperative sort of participation and communication piece that you figure out for which event, operationally, what do we actually need to make sure that this is safe? So how many officers do we need? Do we need officers? Not every event requires it, right? So we're also not saying this has to apply everywhere. But then working with the city organizer and stuff, then figuring out also the city will decide, hey, it's going to come from this pool or that pool, just depending what the event is. So.
Sorry, and where does the money come from that goes into those pools? That's
The city. So what we're saying is we're trying to sustain our finances, right? We're doing police work and right now, from my view, coming from somewhere else, sorry, Mara, I know you're thinking, that we're not actually adequately policing some of the events that are in the city. I was really surprised coming here in the summer and then going personally to some of these events and seeing 0 police officers and thousands of people. And that is unsafe. So I think we need to do a better job operationally, and that comes at a cost because the limitations that we have, how many people we have. So we need to do a better job there. But knowing that there's a cost, how are we going to how are we going to do it more responsibly moving forward? And so this proposal sort of gives an option of how to move forward and be, enhance our public safety while also being responsible for our budget.
And realistically, we're bringing people in on overtime and charging the city for it ultimately anyways. So it's not like it's an additional cost. It's being a little bit more transparent about being upfront that if you're going to have a big event, we need to bring in 2 to 4 extra police officers or 2 officers and 2 reserve officers or something. But again, sometimes we just haven't had the officers to bring in, but we're kind of skating by on, fingers crossed that nothing goes sideways in some of these things.
Okay, so I'm going to say this because I'm like not entirely sure I'm clear. So this isn't asking user groups to provide additional funding, because this is how I read this, is that we are asking groups that want to hold events to pay for policing when, like, let's be frank, tax dollars already pay for that, right? Like,
I think there's a depends in there though.
yeah.
If it's a commercial event that they're charging for or making a profit for, I don't think there's anything wrong with asking either pay for additional police to be available for the event or hiring their own.
Provide your own security.
Yeah. So for example, like the Arts Council provides their own, like, so I'm like, if there's like a security requirement, but I think that before, like, I would be comfortable moving forward with this, that there would need to be a lot more clarity on the who's and the like, if we're talking about like way more clarity before I would be comfortable approving something like this personally.
So, question, clarification then too. First of all, can you give me an example of the for-profit festivals? Just so I have it in my head, because I'm not clear on what those are.
Sure, I know one off the hop, we have the Kootenai Beer Festival, I think it's called. Yeah, and that attracts a lot of people. It's a for-profit event.
But with something like that, and and a liquor license, doesn't a liquor license require security?
Liquor license, yeah.
But that requires, but I mean, doesn't a liquor license already require that an event organizer over, I think it's 300 or 500 people?
It requires security confined to the event.
So you're talking about kind of additional, like.
Well, there's potentially a couple, I don't know, I can't remember what that attracts for people. I think it's only been held once since I've been here, but.
Yeah, it was.
Twice.
Didn't end up kicking off this last year, I think.
Well, there was one that last year down there, but it wasn't as big as the previous year. I think they did a poor job of advertising it, so I was down there. It wasn't anything like the very first one they had, that's for sure.
Okay. And
It's
then,
very event contingent though, like that's part of the risk assessment. And I think as part of the city before they grant the licenses, we're just saying we want there to be some thought put to this, what are the policing requirements? And Chris in particular is trying to be a little bit more proactive with that and letting the city know that there's some issues with security or policing around this event. And I mean, I guess ultimately it's the city's decision as to whether or not they want to ask the organizer. And again, I think we would preface that, but I think most city council would agree that they're not going to charge the Pride Parade and some of the things that are not-for-profit type events. But you've got other events that are bringing a lot of people from surrounding communities to town, spending money, generating revenue for businesses, hotels, everything else, that I think there is an argument to say the city on their own or the city through asking as part of the license being issued for some of these profit or commercial type events should take into account the cost of extra policing.
To supplement that, I think the premise behind what this has happened is that there was a permit that was applied for, and there wasn't a site security plan given to us, and that creates a lot of issues for us for providing public safety. How many officers do we require? If we have a large crowd and it gets out of hand, and we only have 2 officers working, and we have a major incident going on, we don't have that, so it doesn't allow us to prepare properly and have an operational plan set up and have all that stuff in tow. So, totally get your point, Devin.
Yeah.
In regards to, profit and nonprofit.
Yeah,
At the same token, like I said, I think it's important for us to get an understanding, these permits getting signed without any input from us.
Yeah.
In regards to what our resources.
and I personally actually don't have a problem with the idea of site security plans and stuff, event security plans. I actually don't have a problem with that. It really is this like idea of charging an additional fee to user groups to use police services for events that we know are coming, that we already pay for the police, and like these are events that happen every year in our community and they're part of our community. And I really think that like we pay taxes for police. And this is where if we're going to spend police dollars and we need security at events, I'm like totally okay with that. I would personally love to see like less policing of homeless people and our money going that, you know what I mean? Like, so if we're looking at like budgets and where funding is going, like, I really think it's important that we are not asking community groups who are having events to pay for additional policing. Again, like a lot of events, the Canada Day Pancake Breakfast is all volunteer by donation. The Pride Parade, like there's so many events that are like literally already where people are stepping up. And I really find myself uncomfortable with the idea of charging user groups.
Is this more a question of perhaps revising some of the city's processes when they're doing permitting to make sure that they take into account risk mitigation with the police?
Yes, we don't want to have any say with monies, with groups.
Mhm.
We're just going to work with the city organizer to say
Right.
from a security plan, which we
Yeah.
will receive.
Right.
It looks like we're going to require
So many people.
2 police officers or something, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so then now the city is armed with, okay, it's going to cost this much money. What is the event? They can make their decisions. Are they charging the event organizer or are they not?
In other words, the police wouldn't be making that decision.
We don't make any
The
of those
city
decisions.
department would be making.
But
I see,
we tell them
yeah.
what the risk is. We've identified the risk, right? And even these non-for-profit events, there's risk with all of them.
Yeah,
Think about a march through
absolutely.
the town, like there's public
And-
safety risk.
Yeah,
And
for
so
sure.
that's what we're looking to address.
And I'm not disputing that.
Yeah,
I'm just saying like where the money comes from that, we already pay a lot of money for policing.
sure.
And I feel like these are the kinds of events that like some of that money we pay for policing should be covering. Like that's like we already pay a lot of money for policing.
But haven't we established that the intent here is not for us, meaning the police board giving direction to the department? It's not for us to be charging anybody anything.
Correct.
The city will be making that decision. All we're asking by this procedure
This is a memo to the city.
is
not a
to
memo
assess the
public.
risk.
Yeah, this is you're not, if you're the Pride Parade, you don't come to the police department and get this briefing note.
Okay,
So,
This is an agreement that the board sees as having value to have the discussion with the city of Nelson. And thank you for asking that question, because I was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
waiting,
Yeah.
because that was my question, is this is a note to the city, and the city,
department.
I guess, Devin,
Yeah.
could decide that this is a high-risk function.
Yeah.
And therefore, we're charging you something extra, like anyhow, it's like,
okay.
it's just things like, I mean, I know that the theater does a lot of events. I don't know how often they have to, that you're outside of your actual building, so you
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
have to buy
So
anything.
like the zombie.
You know, it
one,
used
for
to be
example.
like,
Yeah,
it used to be like $2 million for liability. Well, now we know that 2 million, like now it's 5. And that costs you nonprofit, profit, to have to pay the bill for that insurance at 5 million versus 2 million has been an increase. There's very odd time that we will waive the 5 million if we think that it's because for many years people have paid 2 and then all of a sudden they'll lift the 5. It's become an additional expense. But that's just unfortunately, again, just like we want to have a risk strategy here in the police department.
Yeah.
We have a risk strategy at City Hall
Yeah.
because when the person falls down, they look around the room to who has the deepest pockets. And if it's out on the street, it's usually the city of Nelson. So we have to
Yeah,
protect ourselves against those liabilities.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that sometimes you have to have those other groups. I mean, the
Yeah.
groups, although, and they're already doing a lot and they're volunteer funded, do have to pay, but we're always very contemplative of
Yeah.
of costs. Like when they had the street closure for, example is, remember when we closed the street last year for the Sunday? On the No Car Sunday?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Well, remember, we moved it because No Car Sunday was like on the smokiest day from hell last year, the
Yeah,
original
that's
one.
right. Yeah.
And what happened is our ruling on going from 2 million to 5 million in liability, their next date fell within the date that the city had drawn the line in the sand to say, after August 31st, all things now for the next fiscal year kind of thing are 5 million. And they came and they spoke to me and I spoke to staff and we had a little powwow and we said, okay, no, because you couldn't control the weather and we had to change it. We had to change it twice to get it down the road. And we feel that that will be, say it's a Sunday, it's in October, that's going to be sufficient. And so we will, for this time, like you've already bought your insurance, you're good.
Okay.
So I have a question. Is this a way for police to recover what they consider additional policing costs through the city when there's events where they need to bring in 2 or 3 more police? Is that what's going on here? Is that what?
Sorry, I'm not, I can't hear you very well.
Is this a way for the police to recover the cost of additional policing to police events through the city? Like going, okay, it's gonna cost us
I would
2
say-
more.
I imagine the city would get a bill.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear on what okay. And there's a difference between profit, for profit. So can I play out a scenario here? And that's not too far fetched. Let's imagine Pride Parade. So Pride Parade is something that, initially was not supported in our city and now has been for a while, but there's been other events related to Pride that, the city could have gone either way on in the past. So let's say we have a city council that doesn't really support Pride in the future. Is it within, looking at these terms here and it being downloaded to the city, is there a scenario where the city goes, oh, Pride Parade, yeah, you can have your parade, but you're going to have to pay thousands of dollars to pay for policing because we actually, don't really want the event happening anyway, because, let's think about the increased presence of protesters and those who are anti-SOGI and LGBTQ in our city. That translates in an indirect way to additional police costs. It's not Pride Parade's fault, but it would be part of the risk mitigation. So is there a scenario here where the Pride Parade would cost the Pride group more money through no issue that they can control?
Well, I would hope that one would call out the bad actors in that scenario.
I don't want to approve something based on hope, though.
I mean, I think there's the test of reasonableness. I mean, I can't offer you anything more than that. I mean, it's a very interesting scenario that you get a group of people around a table that are anti something, and then those things never happen because either through cost escalation or however they deem it, it makes it so uncomfortable for anybody to do that nobody does it.
There's actually 2 scenarios there. One is probably the more likely one, which is increased security costs because of the increased presence of protesters, those opposing LGBT rights. So in that scenario, does Pride ever get stuck with a bill for increased police presence because of things that are, not really related to Pride, they're related to the broader environment? If so, I'm not gonna be supporting such a thing.
Yeah, and I don't, from the city's point of view, I can't answer that question because we don't have anything like this. We don't have this kind of agreement, shall we say,
Currently.
currently.
Yeah.
Is there
And I just
there a
sort of think that,
downside though to having the discussion about risk mitigation, which I guess doesn't always happen now? Is that the idea?
Yeah.
well, I think we try to get around that. Not circumvent, I mean, I think we try to have those discussions when we hear of events coming up. I think to me, always the most difficult events are when somebody sends me an email as the mayor and says, did you know that such and such is happening on Saturday and it's Friday night at 9:00? And then I'm sending like an SOS to the chief because I see what the subject matter is, and I know the subject matter has two sides. And when there's two sides, there can be trouble. And then we're scrambling at the very last minute. And I don't think that even an agreement like this helps that, because nobody's coming in advance to say we're having this protest this week. And those are the ones that I think are often way more costly, and the risk is way higher to the city and to the police. The ones that we can't anticipate, we don't have any information about at all.
So in terms of event planning, so I suppose what I'm asking is, does the city have like its own set of security requirements for events? Like if someone comes and says, we're doing an event, what are the, like, and it's going to be, we expect there to be 1,000 people on Baker Street. Does the city, beyond insurance, have any requirements for security, whether it's you hire your own security or you pay for additional policing? Like, is there policy at the city level there?
I would have to ask that question. I can't answer that question. And I don't want to answer it off the
Yeah, totally.
off the top of my head. I do know that, obviously we have the insurance for sure.
Of course.
And depending on what comes in, there could be some further discussion that probably happens about whether or not additional security is needed for an event. But I don't know if there's a policy, but I can find that out.
Like if you are expecting 1,000 people on Baker Street, you are required to provide a minimum of 5 security guards or this kind of additional policing costs.
So Devin, this is what the crux of this is, how this came about, is basically, this is what's happened.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna kind of jump in and say that, that's where we didn't know what the security plan was. We just got a permit saying this event's happening on such and such date.
Yeah.
And I asked Chris, I go, where's the site security plan for this?
Yeah, I really have, my issue really isn't about the security plans. I'm like 100% for it. You're having a big event, absolutely, you should
But that's our issue.
have and that's cool.
our issue with this
So,
process.
and that's, I have no problem with that. I actually think that's really smart. I just, again, it comes down to whether it's
Who has to
a
pay?
misunderstanding of what I'm reading, or, just like who has to pay, like it's.
If we have, so let's say our site security plan for event X.
Yeah.
Requires 3 police officers, let's just say, to enhance our public safety. That cost, that's just going back to the city, and the city event organizer is working with the police, or wherever that role is, the event approver, working with the police, we're working with them, they're talking to the event organizer, it's this cooperative thing. And again, they come back to figure out which pool of money, either they say, no, this event can't happen unless we've met these site security plans, so there you go, or it's gonna happen and here's the cost, it's either policing, maybe it's supplemented, whatever. But every event is gonna have a slightly different scenario.
Yeah.
And it really depends on the event. And like I said, some events will have no policing. We'll just be aware of it. And that's enough because it's a low risk situation. To James' issue on Pride, these other jurisdictions that have these things in place have Pride, massive Pride events.
Yeah.
And again, it's this cooperation, it's this communication piece. Some officers are available on duty, and there's some cost neutrality there, right back to the police and sort of trying your best to properly police an event. But you can't just do it with on-duty resources every time, right? So there's going to be other additional expenses. Who pays, right? And does this land on the police budget every time?
Mhm.
Is the question. And so,
Yeah.
so although you agree to the site security plan,
Mhm.
what's going to come from the site security plan is going to be a recommendation of policing resources.
Yeah,
So now my question back to you is, who pays?
Who has paid? It's.
It's come out of our overtime budget.
Okay,
So that's what's happened in the past, Jane.
Yeah.
Is that, we have these events come up and we have 2 officers working.
Yeah.
And it is coming out of the budget.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of transparency in regards to what's going on here. We're presenting an ops plan. We don't get the site security plan. We just say, listen, here's the permit. We need 2 officers here. So the 2 officers are working, then we require 2 more officers on scene.
yeah.
Yeah.
Then maybe that needs to become a budget line item. Like that, maybe that's something that's actually like,
And it
Special
certainly
event.
could for the regular fund
Into the-
events. I
yeah.
agree. Like,
Yeah.
perhaps that's just an additional item, put in
yeah,
that, from past experience, we know we're gonna need to bring in 4 or 5 additional officers
Totally.
that day,
yeah,
but we do get a fair number of things that pop up, and unfortunately, it's a side issue that hopefully this takes care of as well. As there's been a few events this year where we've gotten like a day or two's notice.
yeah.
We
Yeah.
can't even find anybody to work.
Well, that's-
Those are the
They
tough
pay
ones.
for it.
Those are the ones that
Well, that's a.
where
problem.
there's
That's-
oftentimes the potential for the worst outcome versus the
Totally.
best outcome. And those are the ones that even this doesn't really capture, right? Because there is nobody that, I'm not having a discussion with anybody about your event when you don't tell me that you're having an event. So
yeah.
I'm not as the city having a discussion with you, so.
But nobody seems to be having an issue, I shouldn't put words in everyone's mouth, but with the fact that there has to be a site security plan. I think one of the concerns that I've noted, but I'll just clarify a little bit more, is if we move it to the city saying, okay, there's extra amount that we have to consider whether we're going to pay or not. Right now, as it stands, the police don't get a choice whether they have to make an event safe. But if the city got to make a choice and say, sorry, we're not supporting this event, that's a problem in my mind.
Yeah, and I guess I don't know how I quell that concern, but when I see this, I don't see that this doesn't come to city council for council to debate
Mhm.
the merit of an event unless it was very much, I would say, some kind of like hate crime, like hate. Like, I mean, we wouldn't, these kind of things don't come to council. This isn't something that comes onto an agenda of council, the fact that I need to get a permit to close a block.
It would just be a permitting procedure.
It's a
It's a
operational thing. It's not,
internal
it's
procedure.
not if there was something that was very, very problematic, it might come to council, but these things don't come to council. The council doesn't make decisions on issuing of permits.
Yeah, so I think that's a confusion for me, like these proposals, why are they coming to us? Like if it's an operational thing and it's between the police department and the city, or like, it's a bit of some confusion. Like when I read it, I had a similar reaction that Devin did, because I was coming from the nonprofit and thinking, oh my gosh, this doesn't look very friendly and supportive, or, so that's where my response. But when I look at it, it's a briefing note, it's from the police department, but why is it here?
Well, because I think you might get asked.
Well,
I think it's
so
a
is
couple
it-
things, Lena.
Yeah.
I think firstly, it's for information purposes.
Information?
Secondly, it's going to be budget impacted. There's going to be an impact on the budget, depending on this. And I think what Devin's kind of suggested is actually bang on it. Maybe it should be a separate budget line item that says, what, extracurricular events or extra special events that require X number of officers.
Yeah.
We know what the number of events are. We have Road Kings, we have, the Cavalcade, we have,
Yes.
the Pride Parade. These are events that should have a budget line item put to it
Yeah.
and assigned, because what we're doing right now is we're just allocating resources.
Yes.
And we're putting that in the
exactly.
overtime.
And
The
it's a real
overtime,
burden on the
it's-
department.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
inflating our budget,
Yeah.
right? And I think the other thing is processes
Yeah.
that are going on that, we're not privy to. The permit's been issued
Yeah.
and we're getting a permit and
Yeah.
we're not getting any input.
Yeah.
And that's
No,
important
That's
for
a
us.
problem.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
And I also think
Yeah.
the general public would like to know that community events that the community supports fall into the police budget and our
Yeah.
regular
Yeah, yeah.
operations.
Yeah,
But somebody coming from outside the community and putting
Yeah.
on a big event and,
Yeah.
and making a profit and selling beer to 2,000 people in Lakeside Park or somewhere and then walking away,
Yeah.
well, there's,
Yeah.
the problems that always occur after
after the,
beer gardens and
Absolutely.
things that their tax dollars are paying for that. Well, this organizer just made a profit and walked out of town with it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Agree with
Yeah.
a really clear delineation between profit, for profit and not.
Yeah.
So, because there's one more item here that's not on, because I had asked for some comments about some more activities in town that are definitely for the open meeting. And we have Angus here for our in-camera. I'm sort of thinking, from having heard the discussion, that I'd like to bring this particular piece back
Yeah.
to the next meeting. And then I will try to answer the question regarding the city in terms of policy around insurance and whether or not we have a subsection of that policy regarding the potential for security costs, because I can't answer that question for you. And so I can see that question needs to be answered. So, and the other thing is that there is on page 1 of 3 of this, in the second to last line, there is a piece that I think needs to be struck. So I think that you get that eliminated, and just the part where it says this mechanism would require event organizers. I think event organizers needs to be struck, and it's just the city to reimburse the police department. Because it wouldn't be,
It would be a fee.
the city would be making the agreement, and then it's the city that's reimbursing, not.
Yeah.
So I do think
Yeah.
that word there
Yeah.
needs to be struck,
Yeah.
but in
And then
reading
the
this, but other
city
than-
needs to have a look at their policies to
Yeah.
make sure
Yeah.
that they're cost recovering for profits versus, like, delineating non-for-profit and for-profit.
And so I totally appreciate this for information, but to me, this is an operational issue. It's not a governance
That's
issue.
what I was trying to say.
So, when you guys are happy with it,
Mhm.
does that make sense? I mean, I don't believe the board needs to approve this. That's my feeling.
I think the board, though, has raised some questions that, you are the sounding board to a certain extent about the public. So, when 3 of you around the table for sure raise issues about what is the impact of this.
What is the intent?
Yeah, looking at through the EDI lens, I mean, then, I'm already thinking that, so if I take that up to the community and I'm already 3, what am I in the community? So I think as a sounding board for sure. And then the fact that these are the kind of things that I sometimes think, oh, this isn't a really big deal when I'm a city council. And the next thing I know, I'm lighting my hair on fire about 20 other things on the docket. And the one thing that I thought was the least,
Yeah, it's the case.
it was the one that I got, 15 emails the next morning about. So, so I do want to bring it back, get the questions answered about what the city policies are. We'll make the one correction, and we can discuss this a bit further at the next meeting after we've had some more time now that we've heard from Chris and about the process of this, and the other communities have this to try to help with their overtime costs and making sure that adequate policing, because the end of the day, as we talk about in the strategic plan, is that public safety really is the overview of what we're trying to manage here in terms of the policing in the city. So if that's okay, so we'll just refer to the next meeting.
Yeah, I think it would have been helpful, like if you were told what the discussion was going to be, like we just read this proposal and we were all reacting.
Yeah,
I thought, we're going to pass a motion that says, we're going to charge nonprofits. Like, like that was the panic, right? But if it was presented as, this is something we've been thinking about, because the rationale for having those plans make a lot of sense. And we want a safe community. Like last week, I was at that movie. I remember asking the deputy, is it safe for me to attend that, and you said, oh yeah, and we will have a presence. And actually when I showed up, I saw a police car parked there, and I thought, okay, I can safely go. And I just watched, I didn't stay for the discussion. I was just to inform myself. That's why I was there.
What on earth was that?
Where?
Yeah, the United Church.
Israelism.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I was very curious, right? Because I support the people of Gaza, but I also support Israel in some ways. So it was like, I just was there to inform myself, right? And I thought, but I don't want to be, stuck in a crossfire or anything like that. I'm not the, but anyways, it was reassuring is what I'm saying. So it's very important for police to be there and to, be present and so on. So, so I think it would have been a little more helpful if we knew what we were doing with this, because it's a lot of thought has gotten into preparing that for us, right?
Yeah.
It feels,
What you want.
so I appreciate that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's not here is I did ask, because I'm getting, and maybe some of you are getting comments about it, but I'm getting emails in regards to the situation with graffiti around town. And I think it's just important to sort of hear from police in terms of what's going on, in terms of what they're looking at, what they're doing. The city where Public Works is trying to clean it up. I mean, there's a multi-prong approach this, but it has gotten a bit more pervasive.
Yeah.
And summer season is approaching, and so I just thought it would be good. And I believe you're gonna give us a little update on graffiti.
Yeah.
And things that maybe there's some tips in there about what the public might be able to do to help you out.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, reports, right? So last year we had 39 reports of graffiti. And if you look around town from the last year, there's obviously far more graffiti out there than 39 reports would provide value for. So we really need the general public to call those things in. It definitely helps, yes, with their stats, but helps us identify particular tags. Because tags can be unique in there, and we like to figure out where zones in the city we may have like a particular tag that's sort of prevalent. This year we've had three reports of graffiti, but that's also fairly normal for the winter months, like the snowy kind of weather. You don't see as much graffiti as the mayor suggested. We're entering into summer and likely to see a lot more.
So I just, when you say reports of graffiti, like I see graffiti and I call you, or reports of I see someone doing graffiti?
So new, fresh graffiti. So
Fresh.
Usually it would be a business owner, homeowner, someone who is familiar with the location and surrounding them and going,
Yeah.
That's new. That wasn't here yesterday.
Like I showed up to the Civic and someone's like drawn over the front door.
Certainly
whatever.
something in progress we want to know about.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
Totally.
That's
What they really want.
Yeah, totally.
So please call us when it's in progress, but also when you notice that it's something fresh, something new.
Yeah.
And we want to know about that. There's a few things we're doing. So first we've started a priority for the organization in targeting graffiti since actually last October. And it's been an ongoing thing. We've had some success, and I can share sort of broadly speaking a little bit about that success, but of course the Youth Criminal Justice Act does mean that we can't share too much about those things, but we did have a few youth charged, and they actually went through our restorative justice program. And so that I would deem a sort of a successful conclusion to one file. But there's more people out there doing graffiti. So our most recent one was a couple weeks ago at the tennis courts.
Yeah, right about that.
So it's still an issue, and it will continue to be an issue. If you look at any other city, right? Graffiti is an ongoing problem. So again, helping us with the data, so getting those reports is a big thing. Our CSOs, we're working well with the business owners, providing them with some pamphlets and some information. There's actually monies available, grant monies available to business owners to do cleanup and restoration for acts of vandalism. So a lot of business owners had no idea about that stuff. So that information sharing is kind of a key thing. And one of the most helpful ways of combating graffiti is actually removal. So by removing it out of the city, out of the particular corridors where you see it, does actually have an effect on stopping other graffiti or other graffitists, because sometimes there's a bit of competition on tags, right? So that can be helpful as well. So we're working along with that. It's still a work in progress. Still a lot more work to do. Yeah, I think that's kind of it, unless you have any questions.
Well, just an interesting little aside related to this. On Sunday, my son was actually helping remove graffiti from a business that was moving into a new space, and they had permission to clean it up because it's on the electrical boxes. And police officer came and talked to him because he received all this reports that somebody was doing graffiti. He was actually cleaning up all the ACAB stuff on the thing. So the police officer, I don't know who it was, but the police officer had a chat with him and said, I got all these reports and I see that you're cleaning stuff up, and then came and brought him a bag of chips and a pop afterwards. So that was a nice little community outreach. But so it didn't seem to me that on that particular day there were issues with people not reporting, because they certainly thought he was tagging an electrical panel.
He's probably out there in the daylight,
Yeah,
visible.
right.
You know, and
Yeah,
the
he was.
unfortunate thing is these people are very sneaky, and they you know,
Yeah.
you can see headlights and cars coming for a long ways away to
Right,
duck behind
got it.
stuff. So, but just on that piece, I did want to comment that there is some confusion, I think, and hesitancy for people to call because they don't know the admin line to call the police, and it's a crime in progress. So people can call 911. You're not
Okay.
going to get in trouble for calling 911.
Also,
over
if
graffiti.
you see somebody doing graffiti,
It's a crime.
it's a crime. So you call 911.
Yes.
But you call, like, so I wake up and I kind of go, whoa, look at that across the street.
Yeah.
All new, I phone just the general line, just to say, I just would like to report that there's some new graffiti in the 600 block
That would be
of
the
Silica Street.
preferable,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
but you're not going to get in trouble for calling 911 to
Right.
report something
Right.
that's happened. But I mean, definitely when it's in progress, we want the call right now to be able to dispatch officers and hopefully catch people in the act. Because we've had that where people call the next day and they're like, oh, I was walking down last night and there was a guy in a blue coat that was spray painting the side of the 7-Eleven, and it's like, how come you didn't call us last night? You know? But I get it, you know, it's people are hesitant because you hear all the things about don't call 911 for this and don't call 911 for that. Like, default on the side of calling 911. Like, it's better to call it than if you're not sure, just call it.
Well, that's great, but I know that, yeah, that helps me a little bit with all of the emails that I've been getting and people saying you're not doing anything, the police ignore it. Well, you know, the police aren't on that particular corner at 3:43 a.m. while somebody's out there with a can of spray paint. Like, so it's difficult, and I think that we all need to participate in this kind of vandalism that's occurring, and I'm very thankful for those that volunteer their time to go out and clean it up, because it's an expense. And I'm just thankful that there's people that still really believe that Nelson's a beautiful place to be, and they're willing to put in that time of volunteering to help remove that. So let's make it a disincentive. I think I'd never heard that before about get it covered up as soon as you can or removed as soon as you can, because then it isn't the fun place to come to anymore.
Just the caveat, story is call us so we can get a record of it first,
Yeah.
and then clean it up.
Well, yeah.
Because seriously, that was happening too, and it was great that people were going out and cleaning up right away, but it was never getting reported. And
Right.
once we started going to some of the chambers meetings, a few things, we were, you know, reinforcing that message that
Right.
I know it might not seem like a big enough deal to report the police sometime, but it helps us to be able to go down there, take pictures of it. We had the CSOs kind of cataloging it and helping us identify, well, this person has spray painted this identifiable logo in 18 different places in the city. You know, it carries a little more weight than you know, a one-time, I got caught because this is the first time I went out and spray painted something.
Yeah.
Great. Perfect. Well, I think that's all really good information. So if there's no other questions and
Chris had-
anything else for the open, oh, you've got more.
Or do you?
Oh, yes, I do think in the public forum,
Chris is
thank you,
doing the heavy
thank you.
Sorry.
I just wanted to highlight, we've put out a few releases to the media. I don't know if you've read them, but we were alerted to some reports from via Facebook, so social media reports of some sexual assaults that were happening in the Rosemont area, right? And so at the skateboard park. And so we otherwise, you know, didn't know about this information until it was brought forward to us that there was this communication happening in social media. So we are actively investigating these reports. They're serious reports. And I just wanted to sort of double down on our release to the media, just to let the board know, let the public know that we are operationally taking some action on the file. Clearly, our police presence, it will be increased in that area just to make sure that the residents are feeling a degree of safety, and we're taking the matter really seriously. And also want to make sure that the public knows that our officers are well trained today in trauma-informed practice, and that I hope that the public feels safe in making reports, and you know they will be treated seriously with compassion and empathy, and that the key message to the public is that, of course, that we believe you, and that's where we start in our policing sort of approach. But also there's other avenues out there. There's, you know, victim services, there's, you know, third-party reports. There's a lot of other things that victims can do and access to make sure the information gets to us if they don't feel comfortable and they don't feel safe doing that. We still want to know. So we're just encouraging that information flow because we haven't been getting it. So
I saw the press release yesterday, I think, on Facebook. Yeah.
yeah, so that investigation is just, it's ongoing.
Great, perfect. Thank you for that. Okay, so if I could have a motion to adjourn, just to remind everybody that the next regular meeting of the police board is on May the 8th at 4:30. So if I could have a motion to adjourn. Thank you. All in favor? That carries. Okay, I'll just give 2 seconds there.
Final break.
Yep, take 2 seconds and
Apologize.